We have a special show today. We're not necessarily on the water or in the woods. We're actually on the woods side with the Hodgdon family, JB, Bob, and Chris. They run the plant, and we're in the office actually right now with the smokeless powder lab underneath us, which we will run through today. Basically, we came to see pretty much what everything goes on to help black powder and smokeless powder. And I know y'all just bought out IMR, so that's another leap y'all have taken to just make any type of powder better than what it could have gotten or what it is, which is great. But right now, I kind of want to go over the history of black powder, the history of Hodgdon's as the distributor and a inventor, I guess you could say.
Right, well, I'm sure we'll get to as we're making our way through the lab, we'll have an opportunity to talk of the changes that black powder has gone through over the years. But Hodgdon's has come out with, where they used to have, they actually have Pyrex powder, and then they've just come out with 777 powder and also come in pellets. What we're wanting to portray here is what we used to have to do with the powder out of the bottle, where you've got your flask that you would pour out of the bottle into there to carry out in the woods.
This is the old-fashioned way. We would take it in loose powder form and put it in the flask, and then what you do is you put it from the flask into the measure and then dump it down the barrel. And now, with our invention of the Pyrex pellets, which was back in 1997, and our recent introduction with the 777 pellets this year, it is brought muzzleloading to an all-new standard. And what we've got here is our 777 pellets, and these are pre-measured powder charges. They're 50 grain for 50 caliber, and what you'd simply do is take two out like this, no spilling, no measuring, you just dump it down the barrel. Safe, easy, and very, very simple.
Very simple.
Yeah, and all you do is you seat your sabot projectile on top of the powder, put your cap on, and you're off and running.
And when Cody and I have used the 777 pellets, extremely happy with them. They go in really easy.
That's right.
And then loading and shooting is a breeze. You're not having a chance of spilling, having any difference in measurements when you pour into here. And they're great. They're simple and easy, and like Cody said earlier, great to clean.
That's
simple.
right. And not that loading it the old-fashioned way is bad. A lot of people love primitive, still
Right.
use flintlock and that. And that's a different type of challenge in the hunt. But I think for beginners and muzzleloader, this is the best way to go because it doesn't really make them shy away from not wanting to do it. It builds them up, and then they'll go into the challenge. But I think it's time to head downstairs and go over all the pressure testing and all that stuff that it goes to smokeless powder, which is different from black powder. And we'll talk about that when we get downstairs.
Modern rifles, for
Right.
muzzleloading rifles,
Right.
with modern muzzleloading propellants, just extends normal cartridge hunters' seasons.
Okay.
Makes it a lot
Another
better.
thing, right quick, while we were talking about the 777,
The pipe cleaner.
there is a pipe cleaner inside the box when you buy it, and it does have a purpose. You slide it in and pull two pellets out.
Need Cody learn the hard way.
Cody and I shot the entire top piece, and then sit there and had to shake the box. We threw the pipe cleaner away. So, but it does have a purpose and it works good. So use it. Don't neglect it like we did.
Right.
Let's get down to the lab, guys.
Okay. We're down in the smokeless test lab. Here's a couple of the test barrels, and notice everything's nice and clean, just to help to add to all the testing. Everything has to be precise, of course. So what exactly are the test barrels for, and what do y'all do in the lab as a whole, I guess you'd say?
We check for ballistically acceptable powder. That is, it has a certain pressure, certain velocity with a certain weight bullet in a certain cartridge, and also for its bulk density, so it comes out the same. When you, as a consumer, go to the store to buy a can of powder, you don't have to worry about it being different from the last canister that you bought.
Even if it was 10 years ago.
Each one of these
Wow.
is going to be the same each time that you go to the store to buy it.
Okay.
So that you don't have to worry about anything, working up any new loads. Whatever you've done in the past, work up for accuracy. It's gonna get the same.
Okay, and you want it to be the same because if you're going to measure it out just hand loading, which y'all have a lot of hand loaders use your powder. You got the annual manual as well that y'all send out, and I guess tells all your new products.
Yes,
that are
and
out?
it has ballistics on all those.
Okay, and if you're loading those products, you want that density to be the same so everything burns right and you're using the same thing. You don't have to adjust. If you get a new powder that's even 10 years old, that's that's pretty amazing that you keep all that on record, and it's a good thing as well. Now, what's the main difference, it's kind of been going through my head, between regular smokeless powder and then you got black powder? And you can't really use smokeless powder in a muzzleloader rifle because of pressure.
Too high pressure.
But what's the main reason that it actually creates a higher
I guess
pressure?
I'll answer that.
Okay.
Black powder is basically charcoal, saltpeter, or potassium nitrate and sulfur. And all propellants for muzzleloaders are a variation on that.
Good.
Our newest product, 777, has no sulfur, which makes it a much easier to clean, and some of the acids formed by the products of combustion with sulfur are not in 777. So, but the difference, you asked the difference between that and smokeless powder. Smokeless powder is basically a chemical compound, while the propellants for muzzleloaders are basically mixtures of chemicals.
Okay.
And nitrocellulose, or nitrocellulose, which is called single base smokeless powder, or nitrocellulose and nitroglycerin is a double base powder. And of course the military adds a third component to that, but for the hand loader, those are the two different kinds of powders, smokeless powders.
All right.
And now, we kind of talked separately about the test barrels here, and you were telling us about what you use them for and how they're used. And there's an area that y'all do the actual testing, and there's a few different steps that we can make our way to. But you've got all the different calibers in the barrels, and do all the testing right here underneath y'all's offices.
Right.
And that's pretty cool. So let's, I guess, move on to the next step and kind of show us what goes on in the actual testing process.
All right.
Okay. I guess I'm closest to the barrels here. I can show, we're interested in testing pressure and in velocities produced, and like we say, in the bulk density. Those are the things we test in this laboratory to be sure that each lot of powder that comes to the manufacturer meets our specifications, and that will be safe and will produce the same type of load for the hand loader. And we test pressures in basically two different ways. One's the old-fashioned way. This is a pistol test barrel, and it's drilled so that when it's fired, of course, pressure is equal and opposite in all directions, which means the bottom of this piston will be pushed upwards, and this fits into the frame of a universal receiver. A very precise piece of copper that has exactly the right characteristics as far as malleability and dimension is placed on this in the gun, and an anvil is placed above it, so that when the gun is fired, the piston raises, and the amount of deformation of the copper will tell you what kind of pressure it's on. That's one method we use. It's the oldest method. Really, most of our equipment in the laboratory was designed maybe 100 years ago. And
Wow.
the same basic methods have been used ever since.
Our equipment's not 100 years.
Yeah.
And the second method is this, you'll see this hole is threaded. And
Right.
it's threaded for a device that is screwed into the receiver. It's called a transducer. And a transducer is basically a natural crystal that gives off a current when it's squeezed, and when it is amplified, it can be read on a computer or an oscilloscope. So you get to see the curve, and it'll tell you some things that you don't learn from the other method. This is really much quicker to use from shot to shot to shot. So for production testing, for instance at the Paradex plant, that's all we use is the transducer system.
Wow.
But you do learn some other things from the copper method as well. So that's how the pressures are determined. And of course it takes a different barrel for every caliber or gauge, or for pistol or rifle or shotgun.
And y'all got them all.
Yeah.
We have a lot of them.
Well, let's go see where the fun stuff happens.
Yeah. All right.
The next step, what goes on here?
Okay, well we've loaded the ammunition now in the other room, where we showed you how the barrels work.
Right.
And since the components of that ammunition may have come in from outside in below zero weather or hot weather or whatever, when the ammunition is loaded, it's brought in here and put in this cooler, that will bring it down to ambient. And I think ambient for us is like 70 degrees Fahrenheit and a very low humidity.
Okay.
So then they take it from there and fire it for ambient conditions. For cooler conditions, we have a freezer that can take it down way below zero. And then for warm, we have a little heater here that'll raise the ammunition to the hottest that you'd ever encounter out in the field,
Right.
over 100-degree temperatures, so we can contrast the cold and the hot and the ambient.
And see
Okay.
differences there. Because we talked
your
about
variable.
that earlier, how sighting your gun in 80 or 90, 100-degree weather, and then going out and hunting in below freezing temperatures can obviously have a
Big
difference.
And
in
this is one
the way
thing
you
we pride ourselves on is our extruded powders, the Australian-made powders, and that is that they have very low temperature sensitivity, such that the variation in velocity and pressure from hot weather to cold weather is very minimal.
Well, that's cool. I mean, that's another thing that when you just think of, you know, shooting as a whole, unless you're, I guess, shooting for competition, you don't really think about that stuff. And
Well, you know, and Cody and I shooting bows as much as we do, and finding all the little bitty things that change
Make a
stuff
difference.
with archery, you don't really think about the things that go into rifles and
yeah,
black
because
powder
you just
and
think it's
shooting
powerful and that's how it's supposed
But
to
there
work.
really is
I
a
guess.
lot of specifications that really have to be matched if you want to shoot the same every time, and you learn them here. And so,
And the next
this is-
step to getting everything online and being able to shoot everything is the shooting room, which is pretty much where you get all the testing. I know it comes into these computers.
Right. And we have, I think Chris is in the other room here. He'll tell you how that works.
Okay.
Let's go in.
Let's go in.
Skill
fire.
is very important. And obviously, the more skilled you are, the better a marksman you're going to be, regardless of what you're using. But if your equipment isn't on a
Consistent.
standard, consistent, whether it's a rifle, shotgun, bow, muzzleloader, then you aren't going to be very good either, even though you are a skilled woodsman.
Okay, that's one thing to remember.
Well, let's step into the firing room with Mr. Chris.
All right, what do you got here for us?
What I have here is a 22-250 rifle barrel.
Okay.
And this is basically what we do to test fire. What we do here is we stick it into this muffler here and back into this what we call a universal receiver. And what we do is we line this up with this giant muffler, is what we call it, and it's got a series of baffles in there that keeps the sound down from going upstairs. And so what we do here is we connect our transducer, which we talked about a little before.
Right.
We connect it right up to the barrel right here, and what we do is we load it here from the back, and then we put the crank up like this, and everything is fired by a air system from the back, so we don't get any false electronic readings.
Right.
So that's the way that works, and it's read on a machine, a computer in the back over
Okay.
here.
And
Okay.
we saw that computer.
Is when it's fired, it's got a spring action, so you can see it recoil back like this. And what we're doing here is we're setting this up for the copper crusher method. And what we do is we get one of our copper crushers.
A little bitty
Yeah.
piece of copper metal.
And what we do there is we put it in here. In the barrel itself, we have a little gas check that we put in. And this is what the anvil that we were talking about before.
Right.
And we mount it into the system like this. It slides on like this right over, and the copper crusher is in the barrel like this. Now what we do now is we close the receiver. Now it's ready to fire. And we walk out from the back, and we completely out of the room when the barrel is fired.
And
Very
I think
high
it's
tech.
cool
This,
that-
this is what impresses me. This
yeah.
and someone that one of y'all, like someone that works here, actually came up with this idea.
Right.
And
This design, the basic design goes back to World War I, but we had to custom design it for our particular lab.
right.
Right.
And once the shell is fired, what we do is we take it back out of the back, and here we show is what happens when it is used with a copper crusher method. The pressure actually drives a hole through the case. So
Wow.
the case is ruined after it's been fired with the copper crusher method. With the piezo method, it is intact.
Okay.
All it does is measure electronically the pressures.
So you can actually use those over again.
Yeah, the piezo method, right.
That's always good. Another thing that amazes me is they have this giant muffler. It's almost like a big muzzle brake, and this room is got special insulation on it, so the sound gets
8 inches
absorbed
of concrete above.
And there's office buildings above where you're doing
Right,
marketing and PR work, and then people down here shooting high-powered rifles, and you can't hear it. So that's pretty amazing. But you can shoot any type of cartridge, testing, get the ballistics on it, and that's pretty cool. There's 2 different ways, of course. But I think we're gonna head over.
JB is waiting on that side of the wall. Once the bullet passes through and goes into the bullet stopper, the snail, and through all the
Velocity charts.
chronographs and everything, and he'll run us through and show us what goes on back through there. So
Great.
let's go meet up with him. He's probably waiting on us.
All right.
These mufflers, what you saw from the other end, that Chris showed you, was the muffler, the barrel going inside the muffler. Our guys invented these mufflers, and the hose you see here is a CO2 suppression system, because residue of powder builds up over a period of time, and then when you fire, the sparks from the primer can set it off, puts it out immediately.
That's cool.
From the end of the barrel to the first, what we call sky screens, are 10 feet, and when the bullet is fired, the bullet going through the light starts a counter, which is called a chronograph, and the next screen is 10 feet from this one. So you have adjustments that you can make so you can get actual muzzle velocity by adjusting for that. And when it goes through the second screen, it stops the counter, and that tells you what the velocity of your projectile is. The reason why we have the cardboard here is because gas will get ahead of the bullet or the powder, the shot charge if it's a shot shell, and create a false reading on this. So if you stop the muzzle blast, so to speak, with this, then you get the actual bullet. projectile,
Most
whatever
technical
it is.
piece of equipment right here.
Yeah, there you go.
Because-
Yeah, this right here, very important.
That's amazing. All right, so it travels through here.
Through the first chronograph, starting the timer,
Yes.
travels 10 more feet to the second chronograph, stopping the timer, and into the snail. Correct?
Yes, that's correct. What this is just a big giant bullet trap. It's shaped so that the opening is wider than the throat. The bullet goes down and it goes around in a circle and then drops back down on the bottom. And the reason why we have the screen here is to stop shot and wads and things, because you have circulate a liquid that helps to keep all the stuff off of this and keeps it from clogging up the snail itself.
Keeps the lead level down and
Yes.
keeps everybody healthy.
That's correct.
And keeps it clean.
Something that stops a bullet.
All right. That is pretty amazing. Something as high powered as a rifle gets stopped by just.
We have some of our projectiles will go over 4,000 feet a second.
3378 or something.
So-
shooting back there.
Wow.
Well, the faster ones actually.
Now,
like
what
this
exa-
Smaller,
Swift with a
yeah.
35 grain bullet.
Really? Now, once the bullet goes in there and, of course, stops and I guess goes into a bin, what do y'all do with them after that? Do y'all just take out the
Okay,
lead?
we just put them in barrels
Mhm.
and just take them down to salvage.
All right, and kind of recycle.
Recycle.
Yes.
Well, that's good.
It's all recycled.
Well, I think that pretty much ends it for the smokeless powder and the testing. Besides, of
You got a
course,
pretty good overview.
yeah, pretty
Right.
good overview.
And all the data shows up on the screens out here that
Yes.
y'all can watch, and you've got it printed out, and it lists every little thing that goes on with
Prints out and gives you
velocity
averages. It'll give you average velocity, what your standard deviation is, what your maximum variation is from fastest to slowest, pressure, the same thing. So you have a real good idea as to what the quality of your product is.
All right.
This is cool.
Well, I say we head out and meet back up with Mr. Bob, Mr. Chris, and kind of go over just everything that we've learned today and kind of share a little bit on the ballistics chart, because that's pretty cool information that all that comes out of just this test. That
Out of
is-
what we show you today, we
Yeah.
can show you the end
What we-
result
yes,
and what you end up
ultimately,
with.
it's culminated in a little manual.
Right.
That's right.
All right, so let's head on out and
All right,
meet up with them
let's
and
go.
check this stuff out. Well, I guess this brings us to the end of the tour. Guys, thanks for having us out.
Thank
you very much.
It was great being able
Thank
to
you for coming.
see all the ins and outs of what goes into the ballistic testing. I learned a lot of new things that we didn't know, and a little bit about Hodgdon that we also didn't know the history. And on the black powder side, maybe we can do a show about powder decks one time, and then reloading. I think
Right.
we'd come down and do a show over that.
We'd like to do that. We had a good time down here this time, and we think Reloading would be a cool show to come back and do with y'all. Just an excuse to come see y'all again. and
That's
hang out.
right.
Good. Ben, welcome anytime.
We had a good time. We're getting ready to head back to Oklahoma. So until then, until next time, we'll be on the water.
Have a good trip back.